The power of story in teaching. An ancient Indian proverb says, "Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me the truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever." The power of story is immense. If you think of your favorite movie, novel, those stories remain in us forever. They teach us many wonderful things and move us deeply. The beauty of story is that we often get so engaged in the story that we don't often notice the learning that is occurring beneath the surface. There are many ways to use stories in teaching. Stories can be told by the teacher or by the students. It is an experiential, constructivist learning process, often in the affective learning domain of Bloom's taxonomy, and is commonly used in transformative education. Jerome Bruner, a cognitive psychologist and researcher, found that stories provide an essential element to the learning process because it makes meaning through experience. Some of the pros of using story in teaching are that a story tends to have more depth than a single example. It really helps students to connect the dots from theory to the real world. It encourages listeners to reflect on their own personal stories and learn from others' mistakes. It brings knowledge and information to life. As the information is gauged with more deeply, more meaning is extracted, making the material more memorable, thus increasing the retention. Stories take advantage of how the brain likes to learn by making associations. Research on neuroplasticity shows that this creates more integrated deep learning. Stories develop the creativity of students because when they listen to a story, they naturally use their imagination as if children. Stories create a positive learning environment. They create connection between students and between student and teacher. Especially if the teacher shares a personal story, this humanizes the teacher. Reciprocity and trust is built, creating a safer learning environment where students feel more comfortable to take risks. Stories can engage students' sense of humor, and stories are richly satisfying to the human soul, which makes learning fun and therefore more engaging. Stories also catch students' attention and can spark student interest, which can really aid in the flow of lectures, providing a nice change of pace. Stories can help student resistance or anxiety by making abstract concepts more tangible for students, or using stories to motivate and encourage them. Stories also encourage the development of empathy because they are putting themselves in the shoes of the characters. Students also individualize what they extract from the story that is pertinent and helpful for them at this point in time, following the principles of andragogy. And lastly, stories are an accessible way of learning for other cultures, especially indigenous cultures, whose way of knowing are often through story. Some of the cons of using stories in teaching are that stories aren't everything. There should be a balance of logic and evidence with stories. Sometimes it can be difficult to conjure up a relatable story to a principle you are trying to teach, or it may not be appropriate to tell a story. It takes practice to tell the story well, as it would with any new learning strategy. And lastly, if the teacher tells a personal story, this can feel risky, and the teacher may feel vulnerable. The instructor and student's role with story. When there is a clear principle, theme, or point the teacher wants to drive home, then the creative use of story is appropriate. Here are 12 quick and easy tips in using story and engaging students. Number 1, provide a story to illustrate how the concept relates to the real world. Number 2, find common experiences students can relate to. For example, use a story about a past student struggling or yourself struggling to encourage them and promote their confidence. Number 3, draw from personal stories. Feel free to embellish or change them slightly. Use others' stories, novels, current events, movies. Number 4, keep it simple, don't digress. Write a timeline to stay on track. Number 5, have a hook in your opening. One teacher opens his stories with the words, "I'd like to share a story with you," and how the attention in the class shifts. Number 6, use movement. Move around the room. Use hand gestures or your body to convey the story or involve the students and get them to reenact parts. Number 7, use dramatic pauses to create tension or drive home a point. Number 8, appeal to their senses. For example, use digital storytelling, music, images, artifacts, video, props, or have students make sound effects can add an element of play. Number 9, have some kind of tension or dramatic climax to the story, like a problem to be solved or obstacle to overcome. You can leave the ending open so the students themselves have to come up with their own ending or solve the problem. Number 10, after a story is told, have students reflect individually or in small groups about their thoughts on the story and what they will take away from it. Number 11, weave story into case studies and role-playing. Number 12, have students share their own stories about a topic. Guiding questions can be provided and the listener writing down the essential elements. Story helps to engage students and create deep, lasting learning. Include stories in your teaching and see how it enriches the entire teaching and learning experience.